So the first question interview information that I wanted to learn from the interviews, I went into the interviews wanting to learn more about coaching, the lifestyle of coaching, what 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 they do in their off time, how much free time they have, all that kind of stuff, and then also like more of the coaching side of coaching, the actual coaching side, like your strategy, your practices, how you structure your practices, what kind of team you want to build, whether it be like kind of more towards that's can lean strategy, and also that can lean towards like character, how you want your team to represent themselves. That's kind of what I went in wanting to learn. I came out learning a lot more about the relationships that they build with their players, the character of their players, and like the lifestyle of coaching, more than I expected on that stuff, and less not not that we didn't talk about strategy and that kind of stuff, but there was more relationship kind of stuff, and rather than like what kind of offenses they run, what kind of defenses they run. We briefly touched on a lot of that stuff, but it was very short-lived compared to the rest of it. And so that's where I was that's kind of where it drew me in. I mean, I understand the basketball side of basketball, the strategy, the defense, the offense, the what you need to do to win. But before I was kind of like lenient on coaching, and now after interviewing these two coaches and like hearing what they have to say about it, I really want to pursue that. Like it's something that I have a passion for, and that I know I can pass on my passion to other people who have a passion and help them achieve their dreams, which sounds super, super cool to me. So the second thing I wanted to touch on was the things that kind of came unexpected in the interview. And one of the first things that was unexpected to me was many of their, or not many, but most of their mentors, at least half for both interviews, if I remember right, were not their prior coaches. So Coach Growth, for instance, talked a lot about his family, and I think we're very similar that way, and that's why we had such a good interview, is because we think a lot the same, and family's super important to him. He said his mom, his dad, his wife, his kids, those are all motivation and mentors to him. And I'm the same that way. Like my mom is the person who, she was the one who got me into basketball. Her whole family is, I was just talking to someone, and they're considered basketball legends in my hometown. And so it was a lot to live up to that name, but also like she shared her passion with basketball with me, and that's where my love of the game started, and it's just grew from there. And my dad he wasn't a basketball player, but he just taught me how to work hard. He's one of the hardest workers I've ever met, and teaching me those things have set me up very well for life. Not necessarily the basketball setting me up for life, but just the lessons I've learned through basketball and through my dad teaching me how to work hard, and both parents being loving and there for me, and anything I ever needed, I can reach out to them. So that means more than just having coaches, who I still have coaches that were mentors that, I picked up on their strategy, and like and one of them is my mom. She also happens to be, she's a 2-for-1 kind of deal, mom and a coach. So that worked out really well. The thing I learned about interviews through this process, interviewing is, I would venture to say, at least 75% preparation. If you're not prepared for the interview, you are not going to have a successful interview. And I think I did a decent job of preparing. I had a lot of good questions, and we ventured off of my questions that I had a little bit, but being prepared with those questions is what made it possible for us to go into these other questions. And so, yeah, doing that, like if you're not prepared though, like if I wasn't prepared with all those questions, the interview would have been, first of all, nowhere near the 30-minute time requirement, and which didn't even really matter. Like it kind of did, because they're both very busy with them being in the middle of the season. So it was kind of like we needed to keep it pretty close to that 30 minutes. We went over a little bit, but so yeah, being prepared is one of the major things I learned. Like, it's a lot easier when you're prepared. And the second thing I learned is you need people skills to interview people, because first you're talking to another person. And so if you don't have people skills, like, they're not going to understand your questions. They're going to give you very dry responses because you don't know how to get those answers out of them. And I think I did a fairly good job of that. Like, I definitely learned throughout the process about how to, like, kind of pull what you want out of your interviewer, if that makes sense. And the other thing is, it's easier when you can relate to them. My mom's a basketball coach. I've grew up around basketball my whole life, so it was something we had a lot of common ground, and so it was super easy to talk to them about that kind of stuff and, like, get what I wanted out of them, like the answers that I needed and that I felt like would be beneficial to the interview from them. So the only changes I would make to my interview process would be, first off, it was I couldn't really control this. The coaches couldn't really control this, people, my interviewees. But it was a really unideal time to interview two basketball coaches, because it's the start to the middle. We're right in, like, the quarter point of their season, and they're just starting to get rolling, and they have a lot on their plate. So by interviewing them then, it was kind of hard to find a time where both of us were free between my baseball schedule and my class schedule and their practice schedule and everything else that they have going on. And so that's the only thing. I think I could have prepared a little bit more and done it maybe earlier in the quarter when they weren't so busy, but it's over now and can't really, shoulda, coulda, woulda. The other thing, kind of talking more about them being in season, is, like I said, they had really short periods of time where I could interview them. So if I had more time, I could have went a little more in depth, but I didn't really have that option. So yeah. And then the other thing, one more thing about them being in season, those are really the only negatives I found about the interview and things that I wanted to change, especially with Coach Kennedy's interview, is we ended up having to do the interview in the weight room here at SFCC, because she works in the fitness center from 6 to 3:30 every day and then practices at 4:30. So there's no way we could have found a time where both of us were free unless it was in the fitness center. So there was a few points where we got interrupted by people who needed stuff from her because she's still on the clock. And it wasn't exactly ideal, but we did the best with what we had to work with. So those are the things I would change. And overall, I learned a lot from this interview process. I really enjoyed it. I have a really strong desire to go into the coaching world now, and hopefully that I learned something that will help me later on and even hopefully soon. So